our friend Earl Ingram Jr. joining me today to the end of the show. And jazzed as hell to introduce right now our friend Joe Zepecki from Zepecki Communications. He's a Dem strategist and a coach and a friend of ours. Joe, welcome to the show, man.
Good to be here, man. How are you?
I'm doing okay. As the Dem strategist, Joe, you got some splaining to do, man. so help me understand what the hell just happened.
Well, every single incumbent political party that stood for election anywhere in the world this year got thrown out on its butt and lost power. That's a fact. It is also a fact that when you look at how the Democratic Party in the United States performed, it was probably the best or the second best compared to those other incumbent political parties. And that is small comfort and solace to people who are now at risk, at greater risk, because Donald Trump is going to be president of the United States again. Let me just offer a couple of other tidbits here. I do not think this is Kamala Harris's fault. I do not think this is black voters' fault. I do not think this is brown voters' fault. I do not even think this is white women voters' fault. All of which are sort of theories that I have heard in the week plus since the election. There is something more fundamental than that happening not just around the world, but in this country and in our culture. In retrospect, as a Democrat, it was probably pretty silly to think that we could win a national election when 2/3 of voters believed that the country was headed in the wrong direction. And the incumbent Democratic president had an approval rating in the high 30s, low 40s. Yeah. We knew all of those things as Democratic strategists and plotters and schemers and people trying to win an election. What we also knew was that Donald Trump was uniquely awful for all of the reasons that, across the Civic media network, listeners are well aware of, so I won't list them all here again, and that would be enough. But it turned out to not be enough. And that is something that we on the left need to learn from and grow from and do better the next time from. But I am not here to say that we are, in a position where we should burn it all down and start over, because while it was a clear Donald Trump win, it was not a wave election. See Tammy Baldwin, Jackie Rosen, Ruben Gallego, see 10 pickups in the Wisconsin State Assembly, 4 pickups in the Wisconsin State Senate, right? So there was enough that went right, including for Kamala Harris, who, went from the day she became, the day Joe Biden dropped out, he was losing to Donald Trump on the issue of the economy by 20 points. And 107 days later, Kamala Harris was only losing to Donald Trump on the economy by 4 points. So clearly people did hear a message from her, and it may just, in the end, like if she'd had 214 days instead of 107, maybe that would have been enough. That's not how this works. And so now we're stuck with the consequences. But I don't know. You get to call BS on any or all of that. And of course, and Earl does too. What do you think?
I tend to agree. I think, certainly Joe Biden staying in as long as he did and the circumstances around that was problematic. And that certainly, kind of exacerbated the issues. What about, we talked quite a bit, a lot of reflection here in the last week or so. The messaging, we had a caller here recently, messaging strategy, and I've heard these things, first time Trump won, and here we are again, and it's just kind of the same thing. Do you feel as a Dem strategist that the quote unquote messaging, as you define it, because I'm not sure that there's an equal known definition that everybody accepts.
Yeah.
Do you think that is a problem for the Democratic Party?
I think the mood of our message is more problematic than the message of our message. And so what I mean by that is Kamala Harris went out there every day and talked about the middle class, talked about giving families an opportunity to work their way into the middle class and live that American dream. That's the right place to be positionally. And the tone, the mood was not that she was going to fight like hell and throw elbows and scratch and claw for you and yours, which does not match the way that people who are living these economic realities are feeling. right? If your paycheck is not going as far as it used to, that's the whole damn ball game.
Yeah.
Right? If you're trying to figure out how the hell you're going to afford new school clothes for your kids and how to figure out what it's going to mean for the family budget if grandma's got to come live with us versus going to a nursing home because she's in poor health, and forget about any notion of taking the kids on a trip over spring break, you don't care about Donald Trump's 34 felonies. And so to have that person hear you, you have to tonally be in the pocket with them. And I don't think Kamala Harris or Tammy Baldwin or anybody on the left was really in the mood, like the tone of communication with the American people who were feeling that hardship the most acutely. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, certainly, I would say that if that's your analysis, Donald Trump certainly filled that gap, man. He was out there being angry, saying stupid things, and giving other people, they're being angry for them, and perhaps that was all the relation they needed in order to go vote for him. Folks, you're listening to the Dom Salvia Show. That is Joe Zepecki, Dem strategist. Also got Earl Ingram co-hosting with me today. Earl, you want to jump in here? I know we were talking about Joe and the strategies and what the Dems need to do going forward. What do you got to say about that?
Joe, I would say that to lead people to believe that people were struggling the way they're struggling because of Joe Biden and the Democrats' policies in the last 4 years is unimaginable. That somebody could think that the impact of people's lives and what has happened to them just started happening in the last 4 years. Just a ridiculous thought. If anybody would give it just a millisecond of thought, you would have to say there's no way that the conditions that exist with so many people in this country just happened in the last 4 years. And yet Republicans were able to pin that on Democrats. And it frustrated me to no end that Democrats couldn't push back or didn't push back, because the impact of what has happened to people has happened over the last 20, 30, 40 years in this country. Mm-hmm. And then the Democrats didn't push back and say, so are the Republicans and Donald Trump going to fix it? Joe Biden and his policies attempted to address all of those issues over this 4 years, and they did some things that needed to be done, but the majority of the things that were on the table didn't get through. Mm-hmm. It was Republicans who prevented it, two stale Democrats, and Republicans who prevented those very things that the Republicans are now saying they're going to fix getting through. You see it right now with the Farm Bill. The people need to have the Farm Bill passed, but it's Republicans saying not until they cut the food stamps.
Right.
So come on, man.
Yeah. Well, I think you're getting to it, Earl, and saying more eloquently than me, which is like, it's just in the tone of your voice. We never pushed back with anger at the audacity of a Republican Party that is lying to you about why you should be mad and who you should be mad at, and is trying to say, no, it's those immigrants, it's those Black and brown communities, it's those trans kids that are that should be the subject of your scorn, when in reality, it is the bosses, it is the CEOs in this country, it is the people who have made it harder to organize so that workers can unite and use their collective power to bargain for better wages, for better benefits. There has been a steady, sustained, decades-long, drive in this country to make things worse for workers. Yes. And so what have we seen? Growing income inequality, right? We're seeing the rich get richer, and everybody else is either stuck treading water, or if they're doing a little bit better, it doesn't feel like it because the cost of everything is too high. And so that's what I mean when I talk about mood, is like, it's okay to be angry about that. It is okay to be angry that it takes, a Democratic president, 60 votes in the Senate, and a House majority all at the same time, which almost never happens, to try to undo the ways in which they have rigged the system to work against you and yours. You want to be mad about something, be mad about that. But Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Tammy Baldwin, and the rest of the Democrats are the ones who took action and stepped up to lower the cost of insulin for you, to make sure that you could get that shingles vaccine, and for a married couple, nearing retirement, save the $800 so maybe they can spend a little more on their grandkids come Christmas. And it's okay to communicate that with a little bit more of that sense of urgency and passion, like Earl and I are doing right now, and which Kamala Harris didn't. She was the joyful warrior. I love her for it. It's a tough thing to do, to sort of be angry when you're the incumbent, but I think a little bit more of that just tonality would have resonated with people. And in a game of inches, which this election turned out to be, maybe that quarter or a half inch is enough.
Earl and Joe, can we be angry now? Can I be angry at the voters?
Yeah.
Can I be angry at those who would support Donald Trump with the false impression that there's some policy that he's going to institute that will raise their wages? Or they're going to wait for another couple of years for those things to happen, for them to realize it and to say, look, I told you so? I mean, at what point, man? I mean, it's one thing to not be aware of something, but when you purposefully avoid the truth, or you once you realize that you dismiss it, come on, man. How are you going to convince people who think that Donald Trump was sent by God to vote for their own economic interests, man? I don't see how that happens, Joe. Folks, you're listening to the Dom Salvia Show. You got to hang on to that one, Joe. I'll let you stew on that. Joe Zepecki, Zepecki Communications. He's a friend of ours. He's a Democratic strategist. Of course, Earl Ingram. He's a show host here on the Civic Media Radio Network. He airs 8 to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday. We're going to come back. And, Joe, I want an answer on that, man, because I try to be nice. I do. I want to be nice. I want to be civil. But, damn it, man, when I talk to people and they tell me I'm lying when I'm telling them facts, it really bothers me. Folks, 855-752-4842. Back with Joe and Earl and you on the lines. And welcome back to the Dom Salvia Show, 855-752-4842. We will get to some of the callers. Special guest Joe Zepecki, Dem strategist with Zepecki Communications. Earl Ingram co-hosting with me today. Jess P.S. is on the board. If tonality is a problem, Joe, I got to tell you, I think I'm the man for the job.
As long as you're doing the job in the right direction. Because to answer your question from before the break, hey, man, you be mad at who you want to be mad at. I'm not going to be. I have a hard time being mad at the voters. They did not create the information environment in which we live. They did not necessarily create how busy their lives are. And, whether you're a single parent on the northwest side of Milwaukee or the northwest part of Sauk County, you might have different lives, but the struggle is the same and it's real. And between, making lunches in the morning and making sure the kids got matching shoes on before they're out the door and getting them to school, getting to work, getting them back, figuring out where they're going to be for childcare so you can go to your second job, then trying to figure out, who needs laundry, who needs help with homework, how do I feed these kids one more time in a day? I can't be mad at that person for not having an hour to spend, watching cable news, God forbid, or, researching at the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, the latest, macroeconomic indicators. That's not how human behavior works. And so I'm not going to be mad at those folks. I'm going to greet everybody with love and try to find, places where we can agree. And when we disagree, do so agreeably. And I'm going to try to never be the person who disagrees disagreeably first. And anybody who chooses that path with me, they might get hollered at, right? Like then it's then all bets are off. But I just don't think we're going to gain anything or be able to build power to protect the people who are now at more risk than they were 10 days ago by saying it's the fault of the people who clearly are frustrated. And I'll just offer one little statistic of this is not unique. It is not unique that people did this in this particular election. In the last 13 elections, so the last 26 years, there have been 11 change elections where control of Congress flipped or control of the White House flipped. That is an incredible amount of turbulence in our politics unrivaled in our nearly 250-year history. I'm not old enough. Dom might be. I know my friend Earl is old enough to remember. Love you, Earl. But you are old enough to remember that there's been periods in this country where like the same party controlled Congress for 30 years and it never changed, right? And now we live at a time when it's like every 5 minutes, the voters are saying, nope, you're fired, in with the new folks. Nope, you didn't do it right either, in with the new folks. That is our reality right now. And I'm going to focus on winning the next election, not be mad at people for making a choice I disagree with in this one.
Dom, I always have to say that as I watch our buddy on television sitting down with those people on the other side, and he's so, suave, and he deals with them, and he's unflappable. Me, I'm an old guy from the film noir days. James Cagney, Humphrey Bogart, and those guys, and Edward G. Robinson. Sing. I mean, I can't do it. I can't sit down with people who just tell. We've gotten to a point in this society where, you used to, if you were going to lie, you wouldn't say it out front. Remember? People used to tell a lie, they would go and hide, and they wouldn't want anybody to know they were lying. They wouldn't want to get found out. But now we've got people lying with their heads up in the air on national television and chest poked out and lying. And the society, certain segment of our society has now bought into that and accepted that. And so how do you get them now, as they've accepted these kinds of lies? They don't accept it from their children, and yet it's become commonplace. How do you get beyond that, Joe?
Well, I would say I got no problem blaming the liar and being mad at the liars and those who know better. I'm just saying the distinction I draw is if you're that, person who registered to vote 6-8 years ago and hadn't voted in an election since, and was compelled by Donald Trump or something, you saw a clip or a friend of yours saying, man, remember like gas used to be cheaper when under Trump. Right. I can't be mad at that person. I can be real mad at the liars, and I am, right? So that's another distinction I would draw. Let's be mad at the people who are responsible for the lies, or the alternative facts, as Kellyanne Conway would say, or as people who are, saying on the one hand they want to drain the swamp and make it work for the American people, and on the other hand are turning this into, a corporate oligarchy where one of the largest government contractors in American history, Elon Musk, is now sitting in on phone calls with, global allies and adversaries alike. Nobody elected Elon Musk to anything, and he doesn't have a position of public trust within the United States government. So that's where we should reserve our anger for, not for the people who are being lied to.
Joe Zepecki, Earl, Ingram. Joe, once a person is presented with, call it the truth, and they still reject it, and they still vote against their best interest, or how their reaction. And people can vote how they want. That's fine. But there are consequences to your actions. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I want people to be held accountable for those votes. We've got 60 seconds left, Joe. Can we be mad at the ignorance, or at least the willful ignorance, and those that would embrace it?
You can be, but you're just not going to bring people with you, right? The most powerful thing in the world is the human mind. It can convince itself of damn near anything, and all of us every day are waking up convincing ourselves and telling ourselves a story about how we're a good person. And so when you come at somebody like that and say, you're ignorant, you're a fool, you don't know what you're talking about, guess what their first reaction is going to be? Defense, right? No, it's you. You're the liar. You're the fool. And so I just think we have to find a better way to meet people. That's a short distillation in the couple of seconds we have left. I can hang for one more if you don't have somebody else. But
Earl, Ingram, Jr., Joe Zepecki, our fair audience, we'll let you chime in as well. 855-752-4842. I don't look in the mirror and say I'm the best person there is, or Joe. That doesn't happen. And welcome back to the Dom Salvia Show. 855-752-4842. We got Joe Zepecki. He's a Dem strategist with Zepecki Communications. Sticking around for another segment, of course. Earl Ingram, host of the Earl Ingram Show here on the Civic Media Radio Network, 8 to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday. It's a party up in here. The phone line's 855-75-CIVIC. It's a phone line. It's a text line. And we got some people lighting up our buddy Joe.
Lay it on me. Hit me.
All right, here we go. Linda from Milwaukee. But Joe, it is the voter's responsibility to research before casting a vote. And if their stomach did not turn just listening to Trump for 5 minutes, then they have a problem. And I'll throw one more out here for you, Joe. Steady Eddie. Joe, I'm mad, disappointed, and bewildered at voters. If we have low information voters, how are we going to have a viable democracy? I don't believe it takes that much time to become informed on the issues and the candidates. Joe Zepecki, what say you?
Well, I'd say democracy is not just about voting. It is about civic engagement. It is about education. It is about being a part of a community, right? Not just a broader American community, but in your community, however you define that. And part of the deal that's changed in America in the last 50 to 75 years is it is just harder and harder to do that. We have more distractions. We have things that are pulling our attention away. I kind of call it like the hacking of the American mind. Yeah, Robert Putnam called it bowling alone at the end of the 20th century and talked about the breakdown in civic life. We should get back to that. We should all be in more golf leagues or bowling leagues or softball leagues. I'm in enough that my wife's kind of mad at me right now. Right. But you have to be really intentional about that because it's a lot easier to sit home and watch one of your 16 streaming services, that auto plays to the next one, or, get lost on TikTok or one of these devices that has an algorithm that is literally designed to keep you locked in. And so, I wish that's not the way that it was, but this is where we are, folks. And I think part of the end result and what it means for our culture when it comes to that is like, back when we were growing up, all three of us, right? Like we lived in neighborhoods that were probably pretty different, but when you lived in a neighborhood, everybody was kind of at the same level, right? Like the houses are all kind of the same size, or if it's, apartment buildings, it's not like there's a McMansion and then next door there's, a 600 square foot ranch. That's not how neighborhoods work. And so we all kind of felt like everybody had the same, and that, people like worked hard and got ahead, like good for them. But now we live at a time where we see what we have, but we can also see what everybody else in every other neighborhood has. And that breeds resentment because Instagram is showing you that everybody's got a McMansion. Well, no, that's not actually how it works, right? But it is fostering this like sense of, when am I going to get mine? I'm working my tail off. I do have that second job. I have that third job on weekends that I'm picking up shifts whenever I can, and I still can't get ahead. And that is making us angry and dividing us. And when you feel that way, you are looking for somebody else to blame. And so I know some of the commenters were probably also pointing to things like racism, things like sexism. Yeah, that is easier to exploit when people are feeling like they can't get ahead, and bad actors exploited it. Boy, did they do it well, right? And they didn't have to be as explicitly racist this time because there were those trans kids to pick on. And that sucks that that's where we are. But it speaks to like the enormity of the challenge vis-a-vis the narrowness of the margins, right? As Democratic operatives, as people who work on campaigns and elections, me and my teams, we can't fix the whole damn world. We're just trying to win elections so we can build a little bit of power to address all of those things. But we didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to a better place overnight either. That's not how progress works in this country or anywhere in the world. And I'll just, while I'm up here on my high horse, I'll just say, like, to anybody who's feeling frustrated or like is really bewildered by the disconnect between those folks who are more focused on what they're angry about, like, yes, if you could pick any time in human history to be alive, if you could pick any place in the world to be alive, regardless of your skin color, the God you worship, or who you love, you would want it to be right now, today, in the United States of America. That is how good the quality of life is. That is how much progress we have made in the last 100 years. So I get it if you look at somebody and you're like, what are you so mad about? But I'm telling you that the world we've created is like designed in a lab to create that feeling of anger, and people in politics are exploiting it. They're choosing to do that, and I am not going into in the wake of that be mad at the people they're exploiting or that they're lying to. I'm going to stay mad at the people who I want to beat in the next election through a fair fight, because that's how we fight back.
Hey, Joe, how come, what part of it is that many people who are angry right now saw their parents live better than they did?
A lot of it.
Because we're in a global technological society.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't that way 30 years ago.
Nope.
And so people could live a middle class life and the American dream. Their parents could without educations.
Yeah.
That's not coming back. It's a global technological society, and Americans only make up 4% of the global population. We have to educate Americans to where we actually fit in the world, so they'll understand. We're not going back. Kamala Harris kept saying we're not going back. But we're not going back to the time when a guy could come out of high school at 18 years old like I did and live the American dream and buy a home and raise a family and take my kids on vacations and save some money. We're not ever going back there. So we got to educate the American people where we are in the overall global structure of things.
Yes, and I'm not actually ready to give up on we can't get back there. We're not there right now where you can, that day after you graduate, go to work at the mill or the foundry or the factory, and 30 years later to give you a gold watch and a pension, and you've bought that house and your kids are, not paying for college on their own. I think we actually can get back there, but it takes responsible, serious leaders and leadership, right? You think about the enormous opportunity that this country has to change the way we power our future. There's going to be between 20 to 40,000 jobs just in this decade alone in construction, building solar fields and wind farms and the battery storage projects that are going to help us replace coal and fossil fuels that are destroying our environment and our planet. That, forget about the hoax of climate change. Oh, it's not real. It's not man-made. Like, I actually don't care. It is an economic opportunity for working men and women to graduate from high school, sign up for an apprenticeship, join the trades, have work for years to come in a growing industry that's going to change the world. And maybe we can get back to some of that. But I don't know that we're going to get there with these guys in charge, right? So that's why I'm not about to lay down and stop fighting, because, I still want, my kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, they got some years before they're done with high school. Maybe we can right the ship. That's what I want to fight for.
Folks, you're listening to the Dom Salvia Show. That's Joe Zepecki, Dem Strategist with Zepecki Communications. Earl Ingram Jr. also joining me today. Let's get to the phone lines and the text lines and the YouTubes and the Facebooks. Tony, he says, Joe is 100% right. The people he's talking about hate all politicians. They don't trust any of them. If that's what you think, why not vote for a guy who the politicians hate, who blames the system? Why not? Be mad? That's not the case. Be mad at politicians for that. Yeah, there you go. Put your anger, as Joe says, as Tony says, towards those politicians exploiting the I hate to say ignorance. I don't mean it in a terrible term. Exploiting the fact that folks don't have the time or the energy or the ability to fully comprehend and eat all the statistics and the knowledge and the facts to make proper decisions. They exploit that. And if I understood you correctly, Joe, put down the smartphone, pick up a bowling ball. I can get behind that. 855-752-4842. I get behind our callers. Let's get to them. Tim from Wales, you're up. Welcome, Tim. What do you got?
Two things. I firmly believe going to the trades, 23 years old, an apprentice will be making $65,000 a year at 23 years old.
Yeah.
But the voters, we have to blame some of the voters. What about the 14 million that voted for Biden but didn't even come out to vote for Harris?
The non-voters. Good point. And of course, it's not just them, but all the other non-voters. I mean, what's the percentage? 60% of the people actually, engage. Joe, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm fighting the unpopular opinion here, but again, to me, it's like if politicians gave them a little bit more to vote for, if an information environment, and the world we've created provided a little bit more context and information, I think more people would vote. I think it's very sad that fewer people voted in the United States than voted 4 years ago. I'm very proud of the fact that more Wisconsinites voted than 4 years ago, but and that despite the fact that if some of them had stayed home, Kamala Harris would have won. Right? But that's like we're taking the wrong lesson if we wish people had stayed home. I want us to have a more robust democracy that requires more than just being informed around election time. It's trying to create a world where you do have a trusted source of information that you can go to and rely on. Because the most jaw-dropping statistics of the election, from my standpoint, were those surveys around, is crime up or down? And the truth is that crime is down, but people who knew the truth were more likely to vote for Biden, and people who believed the inverse, that crime had actually risen, were more likely to vote for Donald Trump. That is a real indictment of institutions and organizations ranging from the news media to the education system. But again, I don't think, of course there are people out there who are willfully ignorant and choose to opt out, and they can be a special category. But I think the vast majority of folks who are, working really hard and really, really busy, if we're casting the blame in their direction, we're misaiming our ire.
Earl, when you were growing up, what was your source of information? How did you determine what the facts were and what was important to you?
Well, radio. Radio was a big deal when I was a young boy. We had transistor radios, and actually television. When I was a young boy, we only had several channels, but going to the library and the encyclopedias. We actually had to read. There were no computers and laptops and those kinds of things for us. And so you had to go and dig into the encyclopedias in the library, and you enjoyed it because there was nothing else going on for the most part outside of some sports or some things like that. But we certainly didn't have all the things that young people have, which give them the same opportunities that we had in the encyclopedias, but there was no TikTok. There was none of these other things that kind of lead them down the wrong path. That's where we got our knowledge and our information in books.
Yeah, that's the other one, by the way. Put down the TikTok and pick up a book.
Yes, and the library, as you mentioned. I mean, back in the day, it was a social thing as well. Much more, and my family, my wife volunteers at the local libraries and do those things, and I think it's great. It's just people still go to the library. I mean, it's been a long time since I went in, but that's the point, though. Some of the books and the resources, those things are verified. Again, buying fiction or nonfiction, you consider the source. But now with the technology, it's not necessarily very clear whether or not what you're seeing or what you're reading is actually true. It's all about the clicks and keeping your eyeballs. It's all about the algorithm, as Joe says. Folks, one last segment. Joe, you sticking around or you want to go, man? How you doing?
Sure, I'll come back.
All right. One more party time with Joe Zepecki, Earl Ingram. We've got a few callers holding. We will get to you. 855-752-4842. And welcome back to the Dom Salvia Show. Last segment of the day. If you got something to say, hit us up on the lines right now. 855-752-4842. Jazzed as hell. Joe Zepecki Communications. Sticking around for one more segment. Of course, Earl going to close it down with us as well. Earl Ingram and you on the lines. 855-75-Civic. A couple from the texters. Put down the TikTok and pick up a book, says Cam. Okay, so you guys went in a circle, came right back to what you claimed you need to change to connect with younger people. And also, in the same vein, Tony says, can't complain voters aren't doing the work to learn when Mega spoon feeds them bad information. I think both those cats come up with some good points. Joe, what are your thoughts?
I don't understand the first one. We don't want our kids reading books. We don't want
to. Put down the TikTok, pick up a book, but then how do we connect with the younger kids if not through TikTok?
Well, I mean, I think if they're reading books, they'll be more informed citizens of the world and will have their minds opened, and then they'll seek out information, which is better than having it spoon-fed to you by bad actors from MAGA, to lead to the second text.
Yeah, but that's easier, Joe. LA Tom, you're up. Welcome, Tom. What do you got for us?
Yeah, Joe, I think we need to start moving in an FDR progressive direction. We have the second economic Bill of Rights as a roadmap of what it is that we should be doing. And if people don't know who Franklin Delano Roosevelt is, then you know what? We have actually really failed as a country and also as a Democratic Party. He actually called out the economic royalists. He actually was the one that said, if they want to leave this country, we will miss them very much. And as far as the undervoting goes, the battleground states is all the people and the media care about because of the Electoral College. You start moving this into a popular vote, and you will see the people of California and New York show up in record numbers that you haven't seen before. And last, we need a media infrastructure like they have on the right with Civic Media, which is doing a great job and should be nationwide. Air America was one of the things that actually helped Barack Obama get elected. And social media. We cannot show up 3 months before an election, pump millions and billions of dollars into an election, and think that that's going to win the day. We need to build an infrastructure so people know exactly what it is that we're coming, where it is that we're coming from. But we need to follow the plan of FDR and get back on the second economic Bill of Rights, which Harvey K has talked about many a time.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, I am concerned that a lot of folks don't necessarily know who that is. Joe, your thoughts?
It's where those books come in handy. No, I think it's a great point about the 7 battleground states and 43 other states. And by the way, I think looking at it that way is a endorsement of what Democrats are doing and how effective the message can be. That when you look at the 7 battleground states compared to the 43 other states in this country, Kamala Harris performed about 2.5 points better. That might not seem like a lot, but from the day I started working in campaigns 25 years ago, the expectation was always that the campaign would get you 2-3 points at the end if you were lucky. That really it's for, that last mile, that last inch, if you will. And so clearly where a campaign was run, Kamala Harris did better, Democrats did better, and we shouldn't lose sight of that. And I think that speaks to both, what's going on more broadly in the culture, but also directly impacts those national voter turnout numbers. Yeah. Unfortunately, I would not be holding my breath for a move to a national popular vote anytime soon.
Not under this administration. Earl, what about the poking in and out, as Tom says, coming the last 3 months of every election year, spending gobs of money and hoping to get turnout? Does there need to be a more of a managed, consistent approach?
Well, if you ask my community, the answer is absolutely. If you ask the churches in my community, absolutely. People, it's feast or famine. And so the Democratic Party is not very engaged or involved in my community until, presidential elections. And that's got to change. I mean, the numbers of young people in my community who don't vote are growing. My parents and my generation always voted Democrat. It was automatic. Well, we're dying out. So the Democrats are going to have to understand they're not guaranteed to get those votes from our children, and they got to work for them. And that's something that they haven't adjusted to.
Let me just add one more thing to the point about the media infrastructure and building something on the left to rival the right. This is one where I think it's fair game to be mad at politicians on the left. The people who are trying to do this, not just here in Civic Media, but also Crooked Media, right? The podcast network, the Midas Touch. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden weren't going on those. Why the hell not? Why would you not go on a podcast because you're mad about what they said about Joe Biden being old, which is an obvious fact, right? and say, well, we don't need to talk to those 6 million people. Yeah, you do. That's what the right does more effectively. And there I will blame the politicians, because if they were more on the team and using these mediums that are available to us to meet people where they are, I think we would be further along in that great race to build more political power, so we can protect people who are at risk, so we can build an economy that works for everybody, so we can make it like it was when Earl graduated high school, so somebody can join the trades, by 23, be making that $65,000 a year. That's a good solid middle class life. That's what we got to be focused on. Enough of this talk about, haves and have-nots and oligarchs. Like, man, let's just work for working people.
Joe Zepecki, Zepecki Communications, Earl, Ingram, thank you both, gentlemen. Appreciate the time always spent with you folks.